My name is Elias Tran, and when I turned 25, my parents gave me a broken toy car. Not as a joke. Not as some nostalgic nod to childhood. As my actual birthday gift. And while the guests laughed, while my father toasted to my sister's new luxury car collection, and my mother dabbed her cheeks like she'd just watched the end of a tearjerker, I sat there smiling with a cracked plastic chassis in my hand. That was the exact moment I knew I would never be part of this family's fairy tale. But I also knew something else. They had just handed me the final push I needed. And that cheap, faded toy car? It would be the key to my empire. Let me rewind a bit. My family isn't just rich, they're the type of rich that pretends to be humble while owning 4 properties in 4 different countries. My father, Charles Tran, is a towering figure in West Coast real estate. My mother, Juliana, is a fashion mogul who deals in high-end boutiques and gala circuits. My sister, Celeste, is their perfect prodigy, Ivy League education, poised socialite, freshly gifted a collection of brand new supercars. And then there's me. The disappointment. The dropout. The passion project guy. I'd always been different. I didn't want to follow their path. I wanted to build something real, startups, apps, innovation. I failed a lot. Succeeded a little. Failed more. Each time, my parents' faith in me withered a little more, until it wasn't disappointment they felt, it was contempt. I used to tell myself that maybe they'd come around. Maybe after I launched the right idea, built the right app, showed them I could make it without their blueprints. But at that birthday party, beneath the golden lanterns and glass chandeliers, surrounded by investors and influencers who toasted to Celeste like she'd cured a disease, I finally understood. There was nothing left to earn from them. Because to them, I was always going to be the cracked piece of plastic. The party was held in a private garden venue on the edge of the city, the kind of place you had to book a year in advance and rent a helicopter just to arrive fashionably late. Everyone wore champagne-colored suits and dresses like they were props on a movie set. I wore black. It wasn't intentional. I just didn't get the memo. Or maybe I did, and ignored it on purpose. Celeste walked into the center of the lawn like a celebrity about to accept an award. My father handed her a long, thin velvet case, 3 car keys inside. Ferrari. McLaren. Aston Martin. Engraved with her initials. The crowd gasped like they were watching a royal coronation. My mother wiped away a tear. You've always made us proud, darling. Celeste did that modest laugh, like she was shocked and flattered at the same time. She had been practicing it since we were teenagers. And then my father turned toward me. And for Elias. He pulled something from his coat pocket and tossed it across the space between us like he was tossing a tip to a valet. A tiny, battered toy car. Paint chipped. 1 wheel missing. The crowd went quiet for half a second. Then someone laughed. At least he's got wheels, my father said. The laughter rolled in like a slow tide. Polite at first. Then full-bodied. I rolled the toy car between my fingers. It was warm from the sun, light as air, but it might as well have weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked up and smiled. The crowd took that as grace. But it wasn't. It was war. That night, as the party thinned and the staff cleared away the wine glasses and flower petals, Celeste found me in the garden near the koi pond. She wore a silk robe like she'd already moved into royalty. Her heels clicked on the stone path. Don't be upset, she said. It's just. They don't really trust you with anything valuable. I raised an eyebrow. Why not? She sipped from her glass. You're unpredictable. 1 minute you're starting a crypto app, the next you're quitting to sell smartwatches. Dad says you're brilliant, but reckless. I smiled. That's funny. What is? That they're so worried about me failing. When they've never lifted a finger to help me succeed. She blinked. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. I stood, brushing off my jacket. Thanks for the reminder. The next morning, I went to visit my father. He was already in his home office, pacing with his phone to his ear, barking numbers and property bids. The man lived in square footage and net returns. I waited silently until he ended the call. What do you need? He said, barely looking up. Just wanted to talk about the car, I said, placing the broken toy on his desk. He glanced at it, unimpressed. I figured it had some meaning, I said. It's what you always liked as a kid, he muttered. You used to tell me about how your father never supported you, I said. About how you built everything from scratch, proved everyone wrong. He stopped pacing. That was different, he said flatly. How? Because I worked, he snapped. I didn't chase fantasies. I built something real. So did I. No, he said, grabbing the toy car and tossing it into the trash bin. You played around. You lost money. You embarrassed this family. I nodded. And I smiled again. All right, I said. Thanks for the honesty. He didn't realize it then, but that conversation would be the last time he'd speak to me with power in his voice. Because while he dismissed me as a reckless fool, I had already done something he never saw coming. 6 months earlier, I'd taken every dollar I had left, emptied my old investment accounts, and bet it all on a tech startup working on AI-integrated architecture planning. The founders were nobodies. The product wasn't even public yet. But I knew what I saw. And I was right. A week after the party, the company closed a $300 million deal with one of the largest urban development firms on the continent. My tiny stake turned into something monstrous. I had more money than Celeste's entire car collection. And now I had the motivation. My father always said, if you want to win in business, you never show your hand until it's time to strike. I used to think he meant that as advice. Now I see it for what it was, an admission. That's how he operated. Build in the dark, move in silence, dominate before anyone sees you coming. So I did exactly that. Just not for him. After the toy car fiasco, I didn't confront my parents. I didn't scream or storm out. I didn't write some heartfelt letter about how they had failed me. Instead, I smiled. Ate the catered cake. Clinked glasses with strangers who barely remembered my name. And when the night ended, I walked out with that broken toy car in my pocket and a storm brewing in my chest. 2 days later, I began assembling my plan. Not revenge. Revenge is messy. It's loud. Petty. What I wanted was something colder. Sharper. A reckoning. First, I made a few calls. The startup I had invested in, Foreman X, had just hit a valuation of $1.2 billion after the deal with Vantage Urban Systems was finalized. My stake, once modest, was now worth enough to make the front page of Tech Capital Weekly, not that I was rushing to tell anyone. Not yet. I liquidated half my shares. Kept the rest in play. It gave me the capital I needed. The next step? Find my father's blind spots. That wasn't hard. He'd been boasting for months about Halcyon Grove, a new luxury housing development on the outskirts of the city. Pristine forest views, high-end eco-design, already rumored to be the next big thing. He had been negotiating to acquire the land for almost a year. But he hadn't closed. The seller, an old man named Lawrence Chu, was notoriously picky. He didn't care for prestige, he cared about vision. So I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Chu. And I brought blueprints. The plans I showed him weren't from my father's portfolio. They were a hybrid design, part smart infrastructure, part green tech integration, using Foreman X's AI to optimize every inch of the development. He studied them for over an hour in silence. Finally, he looked at me. Why do you want this? Because I want to prove I can build something better than what I was born into. His eyes narrowed. You're Charles Tran's son. I nodded. That's why I need this more than he does. He tapped the paper once. Make me a real offer. 2 weeks later, the deal was done. Halcyon Grove was mine. In the meantime, I kept showing up to dinners, to functions, to family brunches like nothing had changed. At one gathering, Celeste proudly announced she'd partnered with a luxury designer to curate custom interiors for her penthouse. My father talked about an international expansion deal in Tokyo. My mother gushed about how Forbes women had asked to interview her about balancing motherhood and mogulhood, as if she hadn't forgotten my birthday 3 years in a row. I sipped my drink. Nodded. Smiled. Inside, I was already building the foundation of something they couldn't imagine. Then came the night I made my first move in the open. Family dinner at the Trenhurst Hotel. Rooftop suite. Long table. White linen. Waiters in gloves. The skyline sparkled behind us like a reminder of everything they thought they owned. My father was mid-story about some real estate negotiation in Prague when I spoke. I bought something, too, I said, setting down my fork. Everyone paused. My mother blinked. Oh? Celeste smirked. What is it this time? A crypto hamster app? I smiled gently. Halcyon Grove. Forks clinked against plates. My father sat up straighter. What? The land. I closed the deal last week. You're lying. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the signed agreement, and passed it across the table. He snatched it. Scanned it. His jaw locked. No. I had that deal lined up. But you didn't close, I said calmly. I did. You don't have the experience to manage something like Halcyon. I'm not managing it, I cut in. I'm partnering with Foreman X. Their smart zoning AI will do most of the heavy lifting. It's already been beta tested in Europe. Efficiency numbers are through the roof. Celeste leaned in. You don't own Foreman X. I own enough. My father shoved the phone back at me. You've made a mistake. I don't think so. Why would you do this? I looked him in the eye. Because I wanted something real. Something that didn't come from your scraps. After dinner, my mother cornered me near the valet. You didn't have to blindside him like that, she said, her voice low and tight. He didn't have to give me a broken toy car, I said, just as quietly. That was symbolic, she said, defensively. It was insulting. She took a breath. You've always wanted to be different. You got that. But don't pretend you don't need us. I don't, I replied. You will, she said. You're still young. Still reckless. I smiled. Then let me crash on my own. The next morning, I got a call from one of my father's oldest associates. Charles is furious, he said. He thinks you're trying to sabotage him. Not sabotage, I replied. Just proving I can outplay him. There was a pause. Then a chuckle. He won't take that well. Let him try. I hung up and turned toward my whiteboard. The next phase was already mapped out. If my father had built his empire with glass walls, I was going to build mine with steel. And the foundation? Started with a broken toy car. Power doesn't crumble like stone. It slides, quietly, like dirt beneath a mansion's foundation. Everything above it still looks polished and proud. Until one day, it's tilted just enough to fall. And by the time the people inside feel it, it's already too late. That's what I was doing to my father's empire. Not detonating it. Displacing it. After securing Halcyon Grove, I made my next move, credibility. In the world my father played in, legacy and loyalty are currency. I didn't have either. But I had leverage, and leverage was enough. My investment in Foreman X wasn't a fluke. I knew their CTO from a bootstrapped accelerator we both failed out of years ago. I reached out. They owed me a favor, and, more importantly, respected the fact that I bet on them when no one else did. So when I asked to be introduced to their partners and board advisors, they opened every door. And I walked through them like I'd belonged there the whole time. The key was not looking for respect. It was acting like I didn't need it. Soon I had meetings with developers, engineers, urban planners, the people who actually built the future while people like my father slapped their names on blueprints and took credit. They liked me. I listened. I adapted. I learned that my father's real estate empire, Tran Holdings, had become bloated. Sluggish. Built on favors and fear. Mine? Mine was built on speed. And the ground started shifting. A week later, I attended an industry gala with Celeste. She wore a sapphire gown, the kind that shimmered like ice. She clung to my arm for photos like we were the perfect sibling duo, until the cameras turned off. Why are you really here? She asked over champagne. I was invited, I replied. By who? I smiled. Elliot Wright. She froze. Elliot Wright was the CEO of Vertex Capital, one of our father's most trusted allies and biggest investors. That's not possible, she said. It is now. Later that night, I watched from across the room as Elliot and my father spoke. My father gestured angrily. Elliot stayed calm, then walked away without a handshake. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew the conversation. And it meant things were accelerating. By month's end, I'd acquired two smaller but strategic firms, one focused on eco-housing logistics, the other on vertical farming design. Both had previously worked under contracts with Tran Holdings. Now, those contracts were mine. The headlines started trickling out. Who is Elias Tran? Disruptor heir? Young entrepreneur makes bold moves in smart real estate. The fall of old money? Rumors swirl around internal Tran Holdings shakeups. I didn't plant those stories. I just didn't stop them either. The tipping point came one Thursday afternoon. I received an anonymous package at my office. Inside, a slim binder of internal Tran Holdings documents, most of them flagged for non-compliant development strategy and questionable contractor allocations. It wasn't illegal. But it was ugly. I made one call. To a journalist I knew from a small tech publication. I handed it off without comment. They did the rest. The article dropped that weekend, Titled, Cracks in the Foundation, Whistleblower Reveals Shady Practices at Tran Holdings. It was clean. Professional. But it rattled the industry. Investors panicked. Projects stalled. And for the first time in my life, I saw something I'd never seen before in my father. Doubt. He called me the next morning. No greetings. What do you want? He snapped. I'm not sure what you mean. He paused. You're not doing this to take over. You're doing this to destroy me. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the city he once ruled. No, Dad. I'm doing this to replace you. You think this makes you strong? You're burning your own name. No, I said calmly. I'm just changing what the name means. He exhaled like a man who just realized the floodwater wasn't going to stop. And then, quietly, he said something I'll never forget. You used to admire me. I did, I replied. Until I realized I had to become everything you weren't. Just to survive. Later that week, Celeste showed up at my office. She didn't knock. She barged in like she owned the place, like we were still kids and I was still the brother hiding broken gadgets under his bed. What are you doing? She hissed. I looked up from my desk, perfectly calm. Working. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said. This family tore me apart. I'm just returning the favor. She stepped forward, her voice low and sharp. You don't know what it's like to carry expectations. I chuckled. You think I don't? You think watching Mom and Dad throw everything at you while pretending I didn't exist wasn't pressure? You're bitter. I'm free. She clenched her jaw. This won't end well for you. I stood, closing the distance between us. It already has for you. Your penthouse? Leased through a Tran Holdings shell company. Paid for by dividends that are about to dry up. Her eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Check your lease agreement, I said. Section 42B. That was the first time I saw Celeste afraid. And I won't pretend I didn't enjoy it a little. The next phase? Unavoidable. Hostile takeover. I didn't want to do it that way. But once the investors began pulling out and the board started asking questions, the opportunity became too perfect to ignore. I made my offer. I had the capital. The support. The narrative. And my father? He had nothing but fading loyalty and a crumbling legacy. He tried to fight it. Tried to rally allies. Tried to threaten me with lawsuits and exposure. But there was nothing to expose. I had no skeletons. Only shadows they'd left behind. 3 weeks later, it was official. The company his name once built now bore mine. I didn't just take his business. I took his seat. His view. His skyline. I walked into that office with the same toy car in my pocket, the one they mocked me with, and I placed it right on the corner of the desk he'd once ruled from. Then I looked out at the city and whispered. Now we built something real. The morning I officially took over Tran Holdings, I didn't wear a suit. I wore a black turtleneck and jeans, intentionally casual, intentionally defiant. The same look my father once scoffed at when I pitched my first startup idea from the garage. Now I was walking through his company's glass doors as the new CEO. And no one could say a damn thing. The first thing I did was strip a name. Tran Holdings became Nexacore, a symbol of the new, sustainable, transparent, future-focused. I called an all-hands meeting in the main atrium. Employees, old board members, junior interns, everyone gathered under the giant LED ticker that used to flash stock prices and now pulsed with a single word. Rebuild. I'm not here to continue a legacy, I told them. I'm here to rewrite it. Some clapped. Some looked nervous. Others just stared. I didn't care. Because in that moment, I wasn't asking for approval. I was setting the tone. The king had been replaced. The week after the takeover was chaos. My father went underground. No press statements. No public appearances. Just silence. Celeste, on the other hand, went on the offensive. She showed up at a board member's private charity dinner, cornered me at the valet station, and hissed through clenched teeth. You humiliated him. I shrugged. He did that to himself. You're punishing all of us. No, Celeste, I said calmly. You're just collateral. Her face flushed red. You think money makes you untouchable now? No, I said. It makes me free. But it wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about watching them realize that the person they ignored, dismissed, and belittled had been carrying the match the whole time, and now the house was on fire. The media had already pivoted. Where once there were glowing articles about Tran Holdings' legacy, Now there were think pieces on the rise of Nexacore and how Elias Tran ushered in the future of real estate. Tech podcasts called me a disruptor. Business journals called me ruthless. I preferred unapologetic. A few days later, my mother visited my office. She looked older. Tired. The carefully maintained aura of elegance dimmed under natural light. She didn't ask for a seat. She simply stood in front of my desk. "Max," she said softly, using my Vietnamese name for the first time in years, "you've made your point." I raised an eyebrow. "That's not why I did this." She sighed. "Then why?" I gestured to the skyline. "Because I got tired of being told I didn't belong in the world I was born into. You could have been part of it. We tried." "No," I cut in. "You gave me scraps and called it a gift. You threw me broken pieces and expected gratitude." She crossed her arms, and for a moment, her voice trembled. "Your father is devastated." I stared at her. "He left me devastated my entire life. Do you really want to see him ruined?" I stood, walked around the desk, and looked her in the eyes. "I don't want revenge anymore. I want closure. And that doesn't come from breaking him, it comes from breaking free." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just turned, walked to the door, and paused. "You still have a family, Elias." I smiled sadly. "No. I had a family. Until you made me choose between being one of you or being myself. And I chose." The next confrontation came from the one person I thought I might never hear from again. My father. He requested a meeting through one of his remaining allies, choosing a neutral setting, a quiet private room at the Arbor Club downtown. I arrived early. He arrived on time. But he looked nothing like the man I had grown up both fearing and longing to impress. The custom suit was still there. But the spark? Gone. He looked dimmed. "Elias," he said, offering a handshake. I didn't take it. He sat down anyway. "I've had time to think," he said, pouring himself a glass of water. "No alcohol. Not today." "I'm listening," I said. "You've built something impressive." I raised an eyebrow. "That's not praise," he added quickly. "Just fact." I said nothing. He exhaled. "You always wanted to do things your way. And I always expected you to fail." "I know. I thought if I gave you too much, you'd never learn. But maybe I gave you too little, and you just learn the hard way." "That's one way to put it." He looked out the window. "You've taken everything." "No," I corrected. "I've taken back what was mine. You just didn't realize I had value until it threatened yours." Silence. Then, his voice dropped to something close to real. "I want to make peace." I leaned forward. "You mean you want back in?" "No. I mean, I don't want to die being the villain in your story." That hit differently. Because for a long time, that's exactly what he'd been. And maybe, in his own twisted way, he finally realized it. I stood, walked over, and placed the original toy car, now framed in a small acrylic case, on the table. He stared at it. "That was cruel," he admitted. "Yes," I said. "It was." He met my eyes. "So, is this goodbye?" I thought about it. For a long time. Then I said, "This is a boundary." He nodded slowly. And when I walked out of the room, he didn't follow. He finally understood he couldn't. The final twist came quietly. Celeste tried to relaunch herself, new business, new branding, trying to lean into the whole empowered woman rising from family scandal image. It flopped. Turns out, it's hard to sell yourself as self-made when everyone knows your car collection was inherited and your penthouse was repossessed. She eventually moved to another city. Changed her last name. And that was the last I heard of her. As for me, Nexacore expanded internationally within 6 months. Foreman X went public. I was on the cover of Business Vanguard under the headline, "From Disgrace to Dynasty, The Rise of Elias Tran." I bought a small house on a quiet cliffside road overlooking the sea. Nothing huge. Just enough. Fiona, my closest friend from the accelerator days, eventually became more. We built something real together. No thrones. No trophies. Just partnership. One night, as we watched the waves crash below the balcony, she asked me, "Do you think they'll ever ask for forgiveness?" I sipped my tea. Thought about it. "I don't know. But if they do, I'll listen." She nodded. "And if they don't?" I smiled. "Then they'll just be part of the story I tell when I explain where I came from. Not where I'm going." 1 year. That's how long it's been since I walked into my father's office and placed the broken toy car on his desk like a flag on conquered land. A lot can change in a year. And sometimes, nothing does. Nexacore is thriving. We've broken ground on 3 sustainable smart districts in different cities, neighborhoods where AI manages energy flow, waste disposal is near zero, and vertical gardens line every building like veins of green against glass and steel. Critics called me reckless. Innovators called me bold. But what mattered most was what I called myself. Free. My days are long, but fulfilling. I wake up with purpose, not anxiety. I answer to no one, not a boardroom full of sycophants, not a disapproving father, not the voice in my head that used to whisper, "You're not enough." That voice is gone now. Buried beneath concrete and reclaimed land. Celeste disappeared from the spotlight entirely. After her failed business rebrand, she took what little was left of her inheritance and moved to France. The last I heard, she was working with a boutique agency and using her middle name instead of the Tran surname. She never called. And honestly, I don't blame her. Because now she knows how it felt. To be looked at and judged for who you were born to be, instead of who you tried to become. As for my parents, they haven't spoken to each other much since the fallout. Their marriage was always less about love and more about optics. When the optics shattered, there wasn't much left to hold. My mother still goes to charity galas. Fewer people ask her to speak. The whispers around her name linger. She called once, months after our last meeting. It was a short conversation. "Elias," she said, her voice quiet and slow, "are you happy?" I answered honestly. Yes. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just said, "Good," and hung up. I think that was the closest she could get to saying "I'm proud of you." I'll take it. My father? He's just a man now. Not a mogul. Not a tycoon. Just Charles Tran, retired, deflated, living in a downsized luxury condo with nothing left to manage but his pride. I bumped into him at a private tech event recently. It was awkward, as you'd expect. We locked eyes across the room. He gave me the smallest nod. I returned it. That was it. No fight. No apology. Just 2 men who knew the war was over. And who won? A month ago, I finally cleared out the old boxes from my childhood storage. I found the broken toy car again, yes, the original one. The wheels still missing. The paint still chipped. But this time, I didn't feel bitterness holding it. I felt power. Because I realized it wasn't the car that hurt. It was what it symbolized, how little they thought of me. And now, I've flipped its meaning entirely. I had it encased in glass, mounted on the wall of my new office, next to a framed headline from Tech Architects Weekly. The young visionary who rebuilt a legacy with nothing but grit, and a broken toy. That headline used to be a fantasy. Now it's fact. I get emails sometimes. People asking if my story was true. If I really took over my father's company. If I really started with just one investment. If the toy car part was dramatized. And I get it, it sounds like a movie. But the part that matters most? It's not the deal. Not the billions. Not even the revenge. It's that I'm no longer stuck in someone else's story. I wrote my own. And I chose the ending. One evening, Fiona, now my business partner and closest companion, asked me a question. We were at the new Nexa headquarters, a sleek 3-story eco-building just outside the city. Glass walls, natural wood, filtered sunlight. It looked nothing like the skyscrapers my father loved. She leaned on the railing of the balcony as we watched employees filter out below. "Do you ever regret it?" "Which part?" I asked. "All of it. The takeover. The distance from your family. The silence." I thought about it. Then I answered. "I regret that it had to happen. Not that I made it happen." She nodded, understanding. Because that's the truth. I didn't want to break them. I just wanted to stop breaking myself to fit in with them. Now? I live in a modest cliffside home. No gates. No guards. Just clean air, open sky, and the kind of peace you can't fake on magazine covers. I have a garden I actually grow myself. I still wake up early, habit of a hustler. But now I drink my coffee without dread. Without needing to prove anything. And sometimes, when I walk past the toy car on the office wall, I smile. Not out of spite. Out of gratitude. Because they gave me the one gift that mattered. Not the cars. Not the titles. Not the inheritance. They gave me the reason to walk away, and the strength to never look back. Final words. People think success is about money. It's not. It's about reclaiming your worth after people spent years trying to bury it. It's about choosing your own name when the one they gave you came with chains. It's about knowing that the world doesn't get to define you, especially not the part of it that said you'd never make it. I started with a broken toy. Now I own the road. And I drive it my way.